My parents lied to me. Then I exposed their darkest secret. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. I'm Ethan, 29 years old, and if there's one undeniable truth about my family, it's that favoritism isn't just a habit, it's a way of life. I wouldn't say my childhood was unbearable, but the imbalance was impossible to ignore. My younger sister, Lily, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. My parents would never admit it outright, of course. To outsiders, they'd insist they treated us equally. But actions? Actions always spoke louder than words. Lily got a brand new phone every single year. I got her hand-me-downs, sometimes still filled with her texts and photos, as if even the device itself knew who was more important. On her 16th birthday, a shiny new car sat in the driveway, a giant red bow on top. When I turned 16, I was told, "If you want a car, Ethan, you'll have to work for it." So I did. I spent months saving every cent for my part-time job, and eventually I got a beat-up old sedan that stalled half the time. The favoritism stretched beyond just material things. My parents poured money into whatever hobby Lily wanted. Horseback riding, piano lessons, even an expensive photography course she lost interest in within weeks. Meanwhile, I was told to be grateful for what we could afford. Frustrating? Absolutely. But over time, I learned to accept it. I put my energy into building my own life. I worked hard, secured a decent job, and created a future where I didn't have to rely on anyone but myself. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, independent. Everything my sister wasn't. Because even now, as adults, nothing has changed. Lily is 26, still living at home, still funded by my parents. She doesn't have a steady job, but somehow that's never an issue. She's just figuring things out, they say. Meanwhile, I'm the one getting the passive-aggressive guilt trips. "You never visit, Ethan. Family is important. You're always so busy with work. You should make more time for us." But the rare times I do make an effort, it never feels like it matters. No one seems to notice. And then came the incident that changed everything. A lie hidden in plain sight. It started a few months ago, just a casual conversation over dinner when my parents started complaining about how tight money had been. "You know how things are right now, Ethan," my mom sighed dramatically, stirring her soup like it physically pained her. "We just can't afford a big family trip this year." I hadn't even asked about a vacation, but she made sure to emphasize it anyway. "Maybe next year," she added with a sad smile. Fine, whatever. I didn't need a trip with them. I had my own plans, my own life. If they were struggling, that was their issue. I had learned long ago not to get involved in their financial mess. But then, a week later, something stopped me in my tracks. I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone when a photo popped up on my feed, posted by a friend of mine. It was a simple airport selfie, nothing special. But in the background, something caught my eye. There, sitting comfortably in first-class seats, were my parents. And Lily. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, just a coincidence. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. There was my mom, hiding behind her signature oversized sunglasses. My dad, wearing that ridiculous leather jacket he always insisted made him look distinguished. And Lily, laughing at something on her phone, completely oblivious to the world around her. My heart pounded as I read the caption on my friend's post. "Crazy seeing people I know at the airport. Hope y'all have an amazing trip." My stomach twisted. I clicked on my friend's profile, scrolled a little more, and then I saw it. Confirmation. My parents hadn't just gone on a trip. They had gone on a luxury vacation. Not just any vacation. First-class flights, a beachfront resort, expensive dinners every night, spa treatments, boat excursions. The kind of trip that people save for years to afford. The kind of trip they claimed they couldn't afford. And they hadn't even mentioned it to me. I sat there, staring at my screen, trying to process the sheer audacity of it. It wasn't just the lie. It wasn't just the fact that they had excluded me. It was the principle. They had spent years making me feel like I was selfish for wanting the bare minimum. "We have to be smart with money, Ethan," they would say. But when it came to Lily, the rules never seemed to apply. For a moment, My fingers hovered over my phone. I wanted to send a text, a call, even just a snarky comment under my friend's post. But something in me stopped, because I knew how my parents operated. If I confronted them now, they'd brush it off. They'd twist it, make me seem unreasonable. Oh, Ethan, it was a last-minute thing. You wouldn't have wanted to come anyway. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? No, if I was going to do something about this, I needed to be smart. So I stayed quiet, and I waited. The smirk that changed everything. Days passed. My parents returned from their oh-so-humble vacation, casually posting the occasional photo, sunsets over the ocean, lavish dinners, champagne glasses clinking in candlelight. But to me, radio silence. Then, finally my mom sent me a text. Hope you're doing well. We should get together soon, it's been too long. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Too long, right? I played along. I agreed to visit. And when I did, I sat through their usual routine. The long-winded complaints about how hard things have been lately, the exaggerated sighs about barely getting by, the subtle jabs about how, Ethan, you really should visit more often. Family matters, you know. They had no idea that I knew the truth. I let them talk. I let them act like nothing had happened. I waited, watching them spin their usual sob story. Then, just as I was about to leave, my mom smirked at me. That smirk. Maybe next time, you should work harder, she said. Then you could afford a trip like that too. Something inside me snapped. I didn't react. I didn't frown, didn't glare. I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. Like she had just told me the funniest joke in the world. She had no idea what she had just done. If she had just kept quiet, if she had let me walk out of that house without rubbing it in, maybe, just maybe, I would have let it go. But she didn't. She sat there, sipping her overpriced coffee in her designer sweater, looking at me like she had won, like she had put me in my place, like she thought I was jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was furious. But fury alone wouldn't do anything. No, I needed something stronger, something that would actually make them feel it. And as I drove home that night, my mind was already spinning with possibilities. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Unraveling the truth. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. My mother's smug expression, the way she spoke so carelessly, as if her words meant nothing. But they did. They meant everything. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. This wasn't just about exposing their lie. It wasn't just about the vacation. It was about years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated as an afterthought. And I was done. The first thing I did, I started digging. I already knew my parents were bad with money, but I had never cared enough to look deeply into how bad it really was. Now I was curious. And the more I looked, the worse it got. It wasn't just a little financial irresponsibility. It was complete chaos. Maxed out credit cards. A mortgage payment that had been adjusted more than once. And the loans. Oh, the loans. Some were from banks, sure. But others? Others were from family. And that's where things got really interesting. See, my parents had a pattern. They'd borrow money, swear up and down that they'd pay it back, then conveniently forget about it. And if anyone dared to press them, they'd act offended. After everything we've done for you, you can't help us out just this once? They had done it to me before, back when I was younger, before I wised up. But I wasn't the only one. So I made some calls. And what I found, pure gold. My uncle, my mom's brother, had loaned them a significant amount last year when they claimed they were struggling to keep the house afloat. He hadn't expected them to pay it back quickly, but he also hadn't expected them to blow thousands of dollars on a luxury vacation while still owing him. And he wasn't the only one. My dad's cousin, he had covered some of their bills when they claimed they were on the verge of losing power. My grandmother, a woman on a fixed income, had given them money for emergencies, and they had spent it on first-class flights, five-star resorts, and gourmet meals. I didn't even have to say much. Just a few casual questions here and there. Hey, did my parents ever pay you back for that loan? And the anger started spreading. By the end of the week, half the family was fuming. But the one who was the most livid? My uncle. They told me they were barely making ends meet. He snapped over the phone. And they're out there drinking cocktails on the beach. Seems like it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. There was a long pause. Then his voice dropped to something colder. They think they can just take from everyone and never pay up? I guess they do. He exhaled sharply. Not for long. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to, because by the time the next family gathering rolled around, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And I needed to see it unfold. Oh, did it unfold? The moment it all came crashing down. I hadn't planned on going to the next family gathering. At first, I wanted to sit back and let the tension simmer, let the resentment build on its own. But as the day got closer, my curiosity got the best of me. I had to see it, had to watch it happen. And when I walked into that room, oh, it was palpable. The usual warm greetings, the casual small talk, gone. Instead, there were stolen glances, hushed whispers that stopped the second my parents walked through the door. My mom, ever the social butterfly, noticed immediately. Her eyes darted around the room, her brows knitting together in confusion. She glanced at me, as if I was supposed to explain why the atmosphere felt like a funeral with a casket open. I just smiled. Then my uncle stood up. "So," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "how was the vacation?" My mom blinked. Once. Twice. "Vacation," she repeated, her voice a little too light, a little too forced. "Yeah." His smile was sharp, his words even sharper. "The luxury resort. The first-class flights. Must have been nice, spending all that money while still owing family thousands of dollars." Silence. Dead. Heavy. Silence. I watched my mother's face shift, first confusion, then realization, then something dangerously close to panic. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it again, like a man trying to find an escape route in a burning building. And then, in true form, my mom tried to lie. "It was a gift," she blurted out. "Lily's friend had a timeshare." Cut the lies. My uncle snapped, his patience officially gone. "You took money from us. You swore you needed help. Then you turned around and spent it on yourselves." He looked around the room, his jaw tight. "And guess what? We're done. No more handouts. No more loans. You want to live like royalty? Figure it out yourselves." I watched as my parents floundered. My dad swore they had always intended to pay everyone back. My mom, in true emotional manipulation mode, clutched her chest like she had just been stabbed in the heart. "We've done so much for this family," she pleaded. "How could you turn on us like this?" But it wasn't working. The guilt trips, the tears, the dramatics, none of it was landing the way it used to, because the damage was already done. And as I stood there, watching my mother's face fall, watching my father struggle for words, watching Lily, who had always been so smug, look like she wanted to disappear, I knew this was only the beginning. Because I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The fallout begins. After the disaster at the family gathering, things started unraveling fast. See, my parents had always relied on their ability to smooth talk their way out of situations. A few fake apologies here, some crocodile tears there, and people would usually back down. Not this time, because this time, they had burned too many bridges. My uncle, furious and feeling completely betrayed, didn't stop at calling them out in front of everyone. Oh no, he made sure they felt it. A few days after the gathering, I got a text from him. "Envelope with Thero, check your email." I did, and when I saw what he had sent me, I grinned. It was a detailed spreadsheet of every dollar my parents had borrowed over the years. Names, amounts, dates, excuses. It was all there, meticulously documented. And it wasn't just immediate family. Oh no, my uncle had gone deep. He had reached out to extended relatives, old family friends, even some of my parents' former coworkers. Turns out, my parents had a long history of conveniently forgetting their debts. Some were small, $100 here, $200 there. Others, thousands. And now, everyone was comparing notes. Then came the next family event. And this time, my parents weren't invited. Not officially, anyway, but they showed up, probably hoping to smooth things over. It didn't go well. The moment they walked in, the energy in the room shifted. Conversation stalled. People exchanged glances. My mom, ever the actress, put on her best concerned mother voice. "Is something wrong?" she asked, scanning the room like she didn't already know. Yeah, something was very wrong. My uncle stood up. "You owe a lot of people a lot of money." My dad forced out a laugh. "Come on now, it's not that serious." "Oh, but it was..." Not that serious? My dad's cousin interjected. You told me you were behind on bills, that you needed help, and I loaned you money for groceries. Then another relative chimed in. Guess that went to plane ticket instead. Huh? And just like that, the wall started closing in. The pressure mounted. They had no way out. My mom, desperate, tried her usual tactic. Tears. I can't believe you're all ganging up on us, she cried. We're family. And usually, that line worked. Usually, it made people back down. Not this time. Family doesn't lie to each other like this. My uncle snapped. You stole from us, another voice added. And then, the final blow. If you don't start paying people back, we're taking legal action. Silence. My dad turned pale. My mom stopped fake crying mid-sniffle. They knew they had messed up. At this point, I thought they would finally admit defeat, that they would finally take responsibility. But I underestimated them, because instead of owning up, my mom turned to me, her eyes burning with rage. You did this. She hissed it like a snake cornered in a trap. You turned everyone against us. I tilted my head. Did I? Or did you do that to yourselves? Her lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. And then, she spat out the words that had probably been simmering inside her for years. You always wanted this, didn't you? Her voice was dripping with venom. You always wanted to ruin us. And for the first time in my life, I almost laughed. No, I said calmly. I wanted to be treated like family. But I guess that was too much to ask. My dad, realizing this wasn't a fight they could win, grabbed my mom's arm and practically dragged her toward the door. Lily followed, for once not smirking, her head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. And when they left, the entire room exhaled. People started talking again, shaking their heads, sharing stories. And that's when it hit me. For years, I had been the outsider, the one who got less, the one who was told to just deal with it. But now, the truth was out. And for the first time, I wasn't alone. But this wasn't over. Because as much as I had exposed them, I still had more. More proof. More receipts. More ways to make sure they never pulled this scam again. And I knew exactly where to start. The final move. After that night, I didn't hear from my parents. No angry texts. No frantic phone calls. Nothing. For people who had spent years controlling every narrative, their silence spoke volumes. But I knew them. I knew they were scheming, scrambling for a way out. So I made my next move before they could make theirs. I spent the next few days gathering everything. Old emails, bank statements, screenshots of text messages where they guilt-tripped relatives into lending them money. Some messages went back years. Others were more recent, lies they had told just months ago. Then, I found something even better. A series of large bank transfers that didn't add up. They were labeled things like family loan and medical expenses, but there was no record of repayment. In fact, there was no record of the money being used for anything other than their lifestyle. Vacations, shopping sprees, Lily's failed hobbies. It was all there. Undeniable proof. And I knew exactly where to take it. First, I called my uncle. He had been the first to call them out. The first to take a stand. I think it's time we show them how many people they've taken advantage of, I said. There was a pause. Then his voice came through the phone, steady, determined. You know what we have to do. Checkmate. Over the next week, I made a lot of phone calls. Every single person my parents had ever borrowed from, relatives, friends, even old coworkers they had taken advantage of. I told them what I had found. And then, I asked one simple question. Are you willing to take legal action if necessary? I expected hesitation, maybe a few people backing out. But surprisingly, almost everyone said yes. Even my grandmother, who had always been the calm, forgiving one, was furious. We raised them to know right from wrong, she said, her voice trembling with anger. And this is how they repay us? By stealing from their own family. That was it. That was the moment I realized how deep this went. My parents hadn't just manipulated me. They had manipulated everyone. And now they were about to face the consequences. The last conversation. I made one final call. To my parents. My mom picked up after 3 rings, her voice cautious. Ethan, we need to talk. Silence. I could practically hear her calculating, trying to figure out what I knew. What do you mean? She asked, feigning innocence. I mean, I've spoken to everyone you owe money to. I said, my voice even. A sharp inhale. I continued, not giving her time to speak. You've elite. You've manipulated people for years. And now, you're going to have to answer for it. Her breath came out shaky. Ethan, we're parents. Exactly. I cut her off. And that used to mean something to me. Silence. Then, her voice dropped to something low and desperate. You wouldn't do this to your own family. I let out a breath. You did it to me first. The words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on her. Then, I gave her the final blow. I've spoken to a lawyer. Silence. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't screaming. She was realizing that this time, there was no way out. If you don't start paying people back, we will take legal action, I said, my voice calm. This isn't a threat. It's a promise. Another beat of silence. Then a hollow, nervous laugh. You don't have to do this, Ethan. No, I said, but I will. And then, I hung up. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. It was done. I had set everything in motion. And now, they were going to have to face every consequence of their actions. The aftermath. In the days that followed, my parents went into full damage control mode. They called up relatives, tried to play the victims, claimed that I had turned the family against them. But this time, nobody was buying it. Because now, the facts were out, the lies were exposed, and the people they had manipulated were done being used. A week later, I got a final message from my uncle. Envelope with arrow, they got the demand letter. They know we're serious. I didn't even need to reply. Because I knew, for the first time in their lives, my parents had finally lost. And me? I was finally free. But even now, I find myself wondering, did I do the right thing? Or did I go too far? I don't know. But what I do know, for the first time in years, I'm no longer the outsider. And that's enough for me. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.